Hi again, Mark here from Talkingbass.net. This week we're going to be looking at one of the most famous bass riffs of all time, Good Times by Chic, and it's played by one of the most funky bass players ever, Bernard Edwards. Remember, the lesson material and drum track are all there over at Talkingbass.net, so just follow that link in the info below. And then while you're there, check out the lesson map where you'll find hundreds more lessons on every topic imaginable. Also remember to leave a comment below to let me know what other riff breakdowns you'd like to see in the future. Okay, first of all, let's work through that riff. So it's originally played at 110 beats per minute, and here it is with the drum track. So I am going to be looking at a few technical aspects of this riff, such as the 16th note rhythms in there, the little syncopations, and we're going to be looking at the notes and all the scales and theory behind all that stuff. But first of all, let's just work through the notes in there. So we begin on an open E. It's in the key of E minor. I'll come back to that in a minute. So we've got 3 open E's. Okay, then we have this climb up. Okay, so we come up, we start on the E there, and then we've got a little ghost note. Now, just before I mention the notes that we've got in there, I am actually using the fingering and fretting that Bernard Edwards uses. I made sure I checked out YouTube and looked up a little live version of this, and you can see Bernard Edwards playing with this fretting. So there are many, many different ways that you could play it, but I'm using the position and fingering that he uses. So we come up. So we have the notes F sharp, G, A, and B. So 2nd fret, 3rd fret, 5th fret, and 7th fret all on the E string. And fingering on this hand, I'm using the 1st finger there for the F sharp and the G. Then the 4th finger, the pinky, for the A and the B. And remember, we've got a little ghost note in there. So altogether that's, so we've got the open E, then the ghost note. Okay, and that's the climb up the E string. Then we shift to the A string, and we have C sharp, D, and E. Okay, so 4th fret, 5th fret, and 7th fret. So once again, I'm using the 1st finger for the 2 notes there, the C sharp and the D, and then the pinky, the 4th finger for the E. So all together, we have. Okay, that's the climb up. Next, we drop down to the open A, and we do this with a little syncopation, which I'll come to later. So, and altogether we've got the 3 open A's there. Then we repeat the A, and then we have. Okay, so open A, and we keep coming back to that A there. We have F sharp, G, and back to the F sharp, 4th fret, 5th fret, and 4th fret on the D string. Okay, so. Okay, so when we go, we have open A, F sharp, open A, G, and then there's no open A between the G and the F sharp. Again, we just go G, F sharp. Okay, so very slowly. And then we're back down to the open A. So, altogether so far we have. Okay, and then finally we have this little fill here. Okay, so we've got the open E, then we've got the B at the 2nd fret of the A string, then back to the open E, and then F sharp to G, 2nd fret to 3rd fret on the E string. Okay, and you can either play that 1st finger to the 2nd finger as a hammer on, or you can use the 1st finger and then just slide up. So. Okay, and that's it. Okay, so very slowly all together. 3, 4. Okay, and we're back to the start, and you can just play it round and round. One thing to bear in mind when you're playing this is those notes are played fairly detached and short. They're not completely staccato and sharp, they're just slightly detached, okay? So we have. So I'm always using this hand, the left hand, to choke those notes off. As opposed to, you know, if we played the whole thing legato, so running into each other, it would sound like this. You know, it just doesn't have the same feel. So use this hand, the left hand, to cut the notes short. If you've never done that, my home position that I talk about all the time, that's really good for this. Make sure that you're muting the A, D, and G strings while you're playing that E string with that first finger, just lay it across, and then put these fingers down across over the E, and then when you play the E, you just lift up that second, third, and fourth fingers, and then you just bring it back down to mute it. So just get used to going between the choked note and the open note, okay? And just try and build up some control. That control with the hands, you know, be it with this hand or this hand, you know, that cutting off the notes, that controlling the duration is a key part in getting your feel there. And, you know, it can mean the difference between playing a groove really badly and playing it brilliantly, you know. So, you know, I'm just cutting those notes off there. Now, when I'm playing up, and I'm playing them fairly short, obviously, I'm just then releasing pressure slightly on the notes as I do that, okay? So I'm still using this kind of home position, so the hand is always in this kind of almost a choking position, and then I'm just allowing the notes to come through when we need them. So I'm kind of stabbing at the notes a little bit, you know, not too much, but I'm just stabbing at them to get that fairly staccato sound, okay? So again, have a listen and watch this hand, so. Okay? So, as I always say, start out really slowly, just get those notes under your fingers, get the position correct, the position shifts, you know, get the fingering right, get the note durations right, get the rhythms in there right, and then start to build up speed. You know, don't worry about playing to a metronome or a backing track to begin with, it'll be too much pressure. Start out slow, gradually build up speed, and then you can try with the backing track at 110 beats per minute. So one of the most important aspects that you really need to nail in this riff is the rhythm. Most of the riff is actually pretty straightforward. We've got simple hits on the beat, like at the start, and then we've got the straight eighth notes on the climb up. But we've also got some little syncopated 16th notes. So the first one to listen out for is actually the fourth note in there. So we've got the three open E's, and then the next open E that we play is actually on the 16th note before the beat. So we have, okay? So if you're not used to playing 16th notes, syncopations like this, it is possible that you might actually play that completely out. You might quantize it to the 8th note before or the main beat. So one thing to bear in mind is that when you're playing things like this, if you're having any problems, it's worth subdividing and, you know, either running the subdivisions in your head or actually vocalizing them, even if it's just quietly. So I'll show you what I mean by that. So the first three notes, we don't really have to worry too much. 1, 2, 3. Now the next part, we're going to be subdividing that beat. Now you could subdivide it as 4 eander. So 1 eander, 2 eander, 3 eander, 4 eander. Okay, and then we hit the A. But I find that's a little bit too much to think of when you're sort of in the moment playing. So one thing you can do is just subdivide just with babada. Okay, now if you're going to be playing that last beat, okay, we're going to have 3 16th notes and then we're hitting the 4th. So all you have to think of is babada ba. Okay, so that final note in there, 1, 2, 3, 4, babada ba. Okay, so very slowly. Ba-ba-da-ba. Okay, so the ba-ba-da is obviously on the beat. I mean, you can use any vocalization you want for this. You know, you could use for-y and, for-y and da. You know, you could do that, or 1, 2, 3, 4. But you know, again, as I say, when you're actually playing through something and you're playing to drums or whatever, you don't really want to be thinking too much. You know, I find it a lot easier to just think ba-ba-da, 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 you know, that kind of thing. So, I mean, you could do it on those as well. So, okay? So that's just to get that first note. Now, the next notes in there, you could probably just feel a little bit better because we're actually just playing consecutive, we're having a gap of a 16th note and then we're coming in. I'm not going to, especially if you don't read or anything like that, I don't want to blow your minds too much or, you know, just have it going over your head. But, you know, for that first note, because it's got a gap before it, that's where the problems are going to lie. A lot of these rhythms, the problems lie with gaps. You know, if you've got to hit these little syncopations. You know, if you're just in the moment playing through a certain melodic line, you can often feel those rhythms a lot easier. Ba-ba-da-ba-ba-bam, you know, that kind of thing. But when there's a gap, that's when you've got to be sure that you're counting in that gap because you haven't got anything to fall back on, you know, relative to your bass playing. So, once again, ba-ba-da. And then we're in, you see. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Ba-ba-da. Okay. The next syncopation comes on the open A just after the run-up. So we have that quick jump down from the E down to the A, and that's actually a 16th note before the beat again. So the vocalization I'm going to use, because we have a bit more of a gap, a 16th note more, you know, waiting for that next open A, I'm going to use this vocalization. Ba-da-ba-ba. Okay, so ba-da-ba-ba. Okay, so like I say, anything you want. Ba-da-ba-bam. You know, whatever you want to do. But it's just vocalizing those subdivisions in there. So it just helps to make sure that you're hitting on the beat when it comes back around. So, and then we've got another little syncopation, another 16th note early on the A again, just before. Okay, so this is exactly the same as it was at the start. So, ba-ba-da-bam. Okay, so after the A's, ba-ba-da-bam. Okay, so same syncopation. So all together we have ba-ba-da, ba-da-ba-ba, ba-ba-da. Okay, so that's how to deal with 16th notes. Now, if you've got it down, you know, you can just feel this because the drums are going to be playing the 16th notes as well. So you can probably, you know, once you've been playing it for a while, you won't need to do that vocalization so much. But if you're having any problems with accuracy, you know, with coming in correctly and hitting it bang on, being nice and tight with the rhythm section, vocalizations, especially if you're just doing it in your head, can really help. I mean, it's one of those things that if you're trying to be tight with things, you know, getting a tight rhythm section, subdividing the smaller the subdivisions, you know, 16th notes, things like that, will always help with your accuracy with coming in with other people. Because otherwise, and remember, I'm only talking about gaps here. If you've got long gaps that you're waiting for, if you're just randomly thinking, oh, well, I'll be fine because I'm feeling it and there's no problem with my rhythm, you know, and then it's just a bit sloppy and messy when it comes in, it's usually because you're just not placing the subdivisions in there. You're not counting them. So, like I say, whether you're counting them ba-ba-da, or 1E and a 2E and a 3 and a whatever you're doing, that's how to tighten up rhythm sections and bass lines. So, let's have a look at the notes and harmony in there. Now, as I always say, to do this, we're going to need to know the chord progression. So it always pays to see the chord progression for any song that you're learning, because any bass line or bass riff is usually going to be outlining the chord progression in some way. So for this tune, we have E minor 7 to A7. Okay, so it starts off, then A7. minor 7 to A7, and I know that now Rogers in the background is actually, he's putting in some suspensions in there. You know, he's messing around with it a bit, but the basic tonality in there and modality is E minor 7 to A7. Now, for any of you that have a little bit of harmony knowledge, maybe a little bit of jazz training, let's say, it is possible to look at that and immediately think, oh, that's a 2-5 progression. So E minor 7 to A7, you know, it's got movement by fourth, you know, check. It's got minor 7 to dominant 7, check, you know. But that would mean that we're in D major. So it would be a 2-5-1, E minor 7 being 2, A7 being 5 to D major. But I would say that this is not in D major. This is in E minor. You know, all you have to do is use your ear. Just have a listen to it. When we finish and land on that E is home. D is not our home. You know, E is the home in there. Just think of that. That's our tonic. That's our root. And often that's a good way of figuring out what key a tune is in. Just listen out for home. Listen out for that feeling of working back to the tonic. You know, everybody can do that. You can all hear, you know, if you're in there, you know, that feeling of resolution. That's a good way of just using your ear to find the center of a key. So with this, I would say it's in E minor and it's using E Dorian as its master kind of scale. So it's modal, I would say, in that sense. But it's E minor, that's chord 1, leading to the A7 as chord 4. Okay, so it's not a 2-5, it's a 1-4. So in analysing this riff and seeing how it relates to that chord progression, we really need to look at the chord tones. So we want to know the arpeggios and the notes in there for the E minor 7 and A7 arpeggios. So an E minor 7 arpeggio. Okay, so that would be, I mean, if we play it down here, E, G, B, D, and then, you know, you can put the E in on the top, but really it's E, G, B, and D, however you want to play it. Play up E, G, B, D. That's actually more in keeping with the riff. So E, G, B, and D. Doesn't matter where you play those notes. E, G, B, and D. That's the E minor 7 chord arpeggio. Next, A7. So the notes there are A, C sharp, E, and G. Okay, so like I say, wherever you play them, A, C sharp, E, G, A, C sharp, E, you know, G. Wherever you want to play them, that's the chord tones of A7. So that's the notes we're going to be looking at, okay? If you have no idea what I'm talking about in terms of chord tones, arpeggios, all that kind of stuff, then if you're going over to Talking Bass, I do have a course devoted to that, Chord Tone Essentials. Just check that out, work through that. That tells you everything you need to know about chord construction, about, you know, how to use chord tones in a bass line, in jazz, pop, reggae, whatever you want to do it. And there's also a complete module based around learning those chord tones all over the neck in every position. So if you want to learn about chord tones and arpeggios and what we're looking at here, check out the Chord Tone Essentials course. So I'll put a link in the info below. So now we can have a look at how the notes in the bass line relate to the chord progression and those chord tones. So we begin with the open E. What chord are we on? E minor 7. So we're playing the root note of the chord. Dead simple. Then we have the run up. Okay, so what we actually have here, even though you could see it just as a Dorian scale coming up, it is actually working around the chord tones. When you look at a scale, like a Dorian scale, if you're playing over a chord, or a chord progression, there's no getting around the fact that we're playing chord tones, but we're connecting them. A scale, in effect, in that sense, is just the notes of the chord, in effect, and we're just connecting them up. Okay, we're just, you know, filling in the gaps as we work up. So think of what the notes are there. We've got E, G, B, and D. That's the E minor 7 chord. You can add the E on the top as well. So when we come up, the F sharp leads into the G, the A leads into the B, and the C sharp leads into the D. Okay, so they are all passing tones. Okay, they're passing between the notes. So, or approach notes if you want to see them from that angle. So okay? F sharp leading into the G, A leading into the B, C sharp leading into the D. Okay, so like I say, you could see it as a Dorian scale, but it's actually much more useful to see how it relates to the chord in effect, because, you know, those notes in there are going to be the notes of resolution. Now, it's also worth looking at the rhythm in there and the fact that those chord tones are landing on the beats. You know, they're on beats, you know, the upbeats. So we've got the passing tones, the approach notes in there, they're on off beats. So they're completely unaccented. So I'll accent the chord tones as we work up and you'll hear. Okay, so you can hear there how the chord tones are really key to that line. For the next part, we're on the A7. So we're landing on the open A. Then we have this little... Okay, so how does that relate to the chord? Well, the G is in the chord. That's the flat 7. But this F sharp in there, that's a major 6th from the A. So, you know, how does that relate? Well, you could see it just as a little passing note up there, but it's a lot easier to pretty much ignore the actual theory behind that. I mean, you can still see it, what the intervals are, but really just see it as a cool funk move, because you get that move, that flat, the major 6 to the flat 7 all the time in lots of funk lines. You know, slap lines like, you know, like Run for Cover. You know, that little move up there, that's in the key of E, that's major 6 to flat 7, you know. That little sound that you get in there, that cool little move, that funky little move, that's the major 6 to the flat 7. So if you're ever trying to write a funky tune, you know, that'll always sound pretty good in there. The final little run of, you know, is preempting the E minor again. So it's not necessarily related to the A7 that we're playing over. It's a run down leading into the E. So we've got the E, which is the root note of E, the 7th, which is the B, sorry, not the 7th, the 5th, so, and then you've got the passing note, or approach note, sorry, of F sharp leading to the 3rd there, the G, okay? So that's all working around the E minor 7 chord, okay? Okay, so again, you can see how all of that relates to the chord tones. But like I say, I know it's actually occurring over the A7, but it's actually a precursor leading into the E minor 7, okay? Okay, so that's a breakdown of Good Times. Remember to like this video if it's helped and leave a comment letting me know what other riff breakdowns you'd like to see. Also, follow that link below over to talkingbass.net and sign up for the free membership to gain access to a ton of different practice resources and downloads like the scale reference manual. Okay, I'll see you next week.